Hi, everyone. Good evening or morning or wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining me. I'm really excited that you're back for webinar number 2. This is going to be fun. Now, this topic, where do you start in helping a child to learn about pain? This is like the core of where my PhD focused. So that was 2017 through to 2020. And so the guts of that was developing the concept of pain inventory. And I think I mentioned last week, 3 or 4 of the items out of the 14 items map onto each one of the books. And so you can give this questionnaire to a kid or even to an adult, a teacher, where a paper came out today in Teachers, a proxy version of the tool. But yeah, you can give these questions, and if answers come up in a certain way, they can prompt you to start with a different book. Now, I'm going to talk more about the questionnaire next week, but I want, and because we're going to focus on the research then. And so tonight I want to focus particularly in on the books themselves. And so kind of just highlighting there are 4 kind of obvious starting points that you might like to take. People are just telling me one person doesn't have sound, someone's saying they do have sound. Okay, if I get a call from the production team, I will pause again, but otherwise I'll keep going. So, fantastic. All right, that's good. Yeah, so I guess the challenge with knowing where to start is you don't want to cause like someone's protective mechanisms to kick in by causing offense or putting up a wall between you. If they don't feel listened to, for instance, there's a lot of evidence about validation. And if someone doesn't feel like they've been heard, jamming a whole bunch of information, giving them a textbook isn't going to help them. But giving them a relatable story that makes them curious, that might be a bit more palatable. And then I think the step that's even better than that option is if you can find out the best starting point or an ideal starting point, it's even better. And then you can journey with them. And so that's what we're going to do in this next 20 minutes or so. And then we'll have time for a Q&A. So yes, as I said, this is webinar number 2. If you missed the first one, the recordings are all freely available on the same link, but I'll be posting them online on social media and stuff, or on the Noi group pages too. You can check that out. You're welcome to share these videos. The idea is to try and help as many people as we can. So we want the information to go out. All right. So I do want to highlight from the get-go the online portal. This is a freely available website, Zoe and Zach's painhacks.com. You can go there and have a look. There's 5 pages, so 1 for each book for kids, and then there's 5 pages, 1 for each book for adults. And when I say adults, there's parents, teachers, and clinicians pages. And I guess the reason I want to bring this up right now is in terms of where to start, that has the information of behind the scenes, like these are the items from the questionnaire that relate to this book. Here's a lesson plan for teachers. Here's some conversation starters for parents. Here's the evidence behind it for clinicians. And everyone can read all of it if you're interested. But the idea is there's really targeted information for those key groups of people who are engaging with this resource. And the website will keep improving and changing over time, which is really, really nice. So this is kind of what it looks like when a kid, this is the adults page. If you go to book 1, it'll come up. There's those 3 buttons you can tap. It's all mobile friendly. It's a really nice website. And I have hopes and goals of doing audiobooks and all sorts of stuff down the track. And all of this will be linked through the portal, hopefully. So at the moment, there's more info, extra videos, quizzes, lesson plans, printables, links, research papers, and then there's more stuff coming soon. So do check that out if you're interested. And if you're waiting on the books, the post has been slow this week, I've heard from a few people. Yeah, if you're waiting, you can at least start diving in a little bit. So let me give you some examples of some case studies that we're going to use to work out when different books might be appropriate. So because the 5th book builds upon all the other books, I talked about last week how it's like the success story that then the child can imagine themselves being in Zoe's situation. And then the idea of these scenarios is to try and maximize the potential benefits of pain science education. Oh, I'm over the screen there. Hang on, I'll just hide myself. There you go. You can read that for a second. I'll just put myself back on the screen. There I am. So we're going to go through the evidence of that next week and think more about the science behind it. But for tonight, let's dive in and take a look. So scenario one, let's imagine you know Sarah. She's 10. She's got recurrent abdominal pain. And that's actually what Zoe also has in the books. And Sarah's grown up, and her idea is that more pain must mean that she's got more damage. And she's playing soccer there with Zoe, and that's one of the images from the book if you're unfamiliar. And for Sarah, someone in Sarah's position, whether that be in a classroom, at home, your neighbours, whoever it is, at school, like in the playground, or it could be in a clinic, in a hospital, or a private practice, maybe a physio or a GP, something like that. This book can be a really helpful starting point because it can create curiosity about pain. And it's kind of like, so she could land at the end of that book going, oh, does this mean it could apply to me? And for the younger kiddies, the 6 and 7-year-olds, you probably need to explicitly ask the questions in the activity section. So at the end of the book, I mentioned last week how there's these pages, the your turn pages. So those blue pages are the same format in each book. And that question at the bottom there, do you think that could apply to you, Sarah? Like, that's the kind of questioning where you're just helping them to explore. You don't need to be a health professional to ask that question, right? You're just exploring what's going on. And it can generate helpful conversation without you pushing your words and your language onto the child. You're letting them to use their voice. And I think that's a really, really important part of the pediatric side of this type of education. So the key message in that book is that feeling pain doesn't necessarily mean damage, and it doesn't often relate in studies. We don't see that. There's lots of examples we could provide, but I'll let you read the book and see what you think, and you can contact me and we can chat more. Let's keep going though. I think you're understanding where we're heading now. So scenario 2, let's imagine there's a boy, Billy. He's 8. He's got knee pain, and it started when he was playing sport, but it just has not gone away. Something unique about Billy is that he's fascinated by science. And so for me, that alone, you think of the book where Zoe's wearing the lab coat, this one. I think that could be a really nice starting point, because why hasn't your pain gone away, Billy? That's a hard question to ask an 8-year-old. Whereas if you say, hey, check out this book, let's have a think about how complicated pain is together and see what you reckon. Like, that's a more accessible question. And in that book, it tells the story about the red and the blue lights, that research study. And this is the image that we have where we start to represent like things like thoughts, beliefs, expectations, memories, the environment, the content, all the different contextual variables and different things going on that contribute to a pain experience. And the idea that we've said, like you can say to a kid, imagine that there were some silly little buttons in your head and one was more pain, one was less pain. Do you think your feelings would be jumping on the more pain or the less pain? And then Billy would be like, well, I've been crying a lot, so probably makes it worse. And they start off not really knowing what to do, but I guess intuitively, because it's just this or that option, they get quite good at it reasonably quick. And that can bleed over into their everyday life, where they start realizing, oh, when I take really big breaths, that calms my emotions down, which then improves this or whatever. So the strategies that they're learning with their physio, the psychologist, the social worker, the counselor, whoever's around, can be really supported with this simple framework of the volume buttons. And so I really like this book as a starting point, probably for the vast majority of kids, actually. So book 1's got the startle factor, the kind of the news headline, but book 2 at like a clinical level makes a real lot of sense to me. So if we're going to start with that book, Billy might say, oh, I can't believe that there were so many different things that influence every pain experience. And so now the cool thing about a hardcover, so if you have an ebook, it's a little bit tricky, it doesn't really work. So we made hardcover books because when Billy then has his flare up in a month's time, when his knee pain comes bad again, or whatever's happening, he can go back to the book and go, I do have strategies and my pain is complicated and I will go and try this or do that. And I think that's a a really different approach to what our general society does. We retreat back into, well, this is what my parents did, so I better do the same thing, regardless of what the science says. And that's a hard thing, that's a hard mold to break. And so, parents who are listening, this is your chance to influence the next generation. It's very exciting for me. So that last point there, it's not just for him or just for his parents or his health professionals or his teacher. This is even like potentially the coach doesn't know this. I remember my soccer coach, actually, it was not too long ago. I was going for a run and I just happened to see my soccer coach from when I was 12. And he yelled out to me, "Josh, you shouldn't be running on the concrete. You'll hurt your knees." And to me now, as a physiotherapist who understands the evidence that loading is really good for our joints, it just baffles me, the fear that our society has about movement and all these different misconceptions that can come up. And obviously when I was running, I didn't have time to explain the evidence, but it was a really interesting idea to think about how do you confront these misconceptions so that it's not only you that benefits, but it's everyone. And I think that these kind of resources are the starting point of that, but it's going to take time. Not everyone's going to read the book tonight. Well, I hope they do, but I think I'm too optimistic with that. All right. Scenario number 3. Let's keep going. Henry. It's like with my students that I teach, we often have case study, and the students are like, "Oh, there's so much happening." But that's what it's like in real life when you're seeing patients and you see one after the other. And so you're getting a glimpse into that tonight. It's funny talking to a screen and just rambling sometimes. So scenario 3, Henry. He is a 9-year-old boy. He's in Zoe and Zach's class, and this is the book where they go on their virtual reality adventure. And I think what's interesting, and the reason I want to bring up this case study, is that Henry doesn't have chronic pain. Could the books and could this information be relevant? So here's book 3, the red one. What do you think? Like, what's your gut feeling when I ask that question? And I want you to think about that, really reflect on why you had that gut reaction. So in this book, the kids in the class follow their teacher virtually and they go through the brain and they see in an acute pain scenario, when you graze your knee, there's at least 7 messages that are going up and down through your body. So there's touch messages, danger messages, protection messages, voice messages, sight messages, lots of stuff going on. And all in a split second, you'll feel pain. And we talk about the complexity of that split second. And then at the end of the book, we think about Zoe's tummy pain that's been going on for a couple of years and the complexity of that. And there's the wind up of the nervous system and lots of other factors that are going in. It does get more complex. And so for a boy like Henry, who's say 9 and doesn't have chronic pain, this is where this curiosity comes in. It's got tech, it's got the brain. And in research, a study we did recently, kids love talking about the brain. Like on average, our society, for some reason, is brain obsessed. So we made this book to cater to that. So Henry could feel really shocked and he could be really complicated. I feel like an appreciation for the complication that Zoe faces on a daily basis. He's seen her miss class before. He's seen that happen, but he's kind of not sure why and what's going on with her. And I personally relate to that character of going, oh, I didn't understand what someone else was going through. And so we hope that this book and the questions at the end of the book can help kids to develop skills like empathy. And we know, like the psychologist who reviewed these books was so helpful and in guiding to ensure that these questions facilitate really meaningful conversations and direct people in the right path. Because it's not like these books are a cure-all. It's to get the right conversation, to put people into the right direction. And so that comment there at the bottom is, it may also plant seeds to reduce stigma about pain. And that's what someone like Henry could easily think. He's like, oh, Zoe never comes to soccer training anymore. Zoe always leaves school early, and has those negative views. Whereas if he understands that it's really complicated, there might be like, oh, I wonder how I can help Zoe to get back to school full time or whatever it is. Like, can you see how there's a real shift? For me, I think that's a big deal. So what we're going to do is pause there. I'm going to show you a clip. And while I show the clip, if you want to type any questions in the Q&A, you're welcome to. So we'll watch the video and then we're going to talk about one more scenario and then we'll do the Q&A. So I'm going to pop this video on and let's see how it goes. I have a PhD student, Beck Fechner, who I'll mention now. She's doing stuff on teachers in schools, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on preventative pain science education. So if we so teachers are the experts at teaching.
Yep.
If we give the teachers the framework of the biopsychosocial model, DIMS and SIMS, something like this, a framework about pain, maybe the new kids books we're working on, and let them run with it. Give them a project, have a go, embed it in the mental health curriculum. Do you think there's merit in that? And I mean, we're going to test this, but I'd just be interested to hear your thoughts on the potential of preventative education.
Absolutely. I think ultimately this epidemic of pain that we have in right through childhood, adolescenthood, and adulthood, I think the ultimate prevention must come down to education, number one, and education at a young age. And as you know, we don't have any data on that, but it just makes so much sense to intervene early. We've seen benefit with early education with other health issues.
Yep.
So why not get in there with pain early?
Great. Okay, I'll just put myself back on the screen. One sec. All right. So before I talk about this next scenario, I just want you to think about that video. So David Butler is world-renowned, really, really respected researcher, just retired actually. He's the author of Explain Pain. He's done so much, made such an impact on the world, and helped so many people in pain. And I got to ask him that extra question. So in the last slide I presented, I said, what if it could help kids like Henry to be more helpful to Zoe? But here I got to ask Dave Butler and get his opinion, and I totally agree with it, and that's where our research is heading. But could, for someone like Henry, this type of education prevent the disability related to pain? And this is what a lot of clinicians, when you speak to them about this question, a lot of them think, well, the strategies that we use to manage and treat chronic pain make a whole lot of sense in a preventative context. So things like not spiraling down the paths of fear and disability if you feel empowered by education. Anyway, I'm going to leave that there because we're going to talk more about the evidence next week. But I hope that's inspiring and encouraging to you to think about who these books might be for. So rather than it being for, I'd only give it to a kid with chronic pain, maybe this is the sort of thing of their birthday's coming up or whatever. A lot of libraries have contacted me in the last week, which is exciting. So hopefully the books are becoming more and more available, and we're going to get to see that in real time. We're going to be collecting lots of data and seeing, hopefully, the prevalence of pain decrease in our lifetimes. That would be amazing. Or at least the prevalence of chronic pain-related disability, so things like missing out on work down the track when you're older. All right, let's keep going. Scenario 4. Next person's here. So this is Zach now. He's 11. He doesn't want to miss school anymore because he's got back pain and he keeps missing out. He's got his physio. He's seeing a physio and he's learning about this thing called pacing. It's a buzzword. He's Googled it. He has a little bit of an idea. And the physio is trying to teach him graded exposure. So getting him back to doing stuff really gradually, sneaking up on his nervous system, doing that little bit more. You can see that snippet from the book on the slide there. That is actually directly from the book, and that handout is on the online platform I mentioned. And it's a really nice example. It's a combination of a bunch of different case studies brought together in a really simple format that is reproducible for other kids. And it just shows the progression of Zach returning gradually back into things like carrying his bag, making lunch, get back to school, or more class time, all of those things. The idea is it's really, really hands-on and practical. This is not just a nice story anymore. So for someone like that character that I just set up, if that boy was to read this book, the idea is to then set up a plan and begin that journey. So you would go and see a health professional. In Australia, we can access 5 visits to a health professional like a physiotherapist under the EPC program. It doesn't cost anything. And that's the high value care that we can offer kids who are at risk of developing chronic pain after an injury or a disease or whatever it is. The reason I harp on about this is uh, Jen Norton, she's my PhD student now. She did a systematic review a few years ago. Kids with chronic pain are missing 22% of their school life. That's 1 in 5, which means it's the equivalent of 1 day a week. And the data of kids in pain clinics that from last year, I think it showed 3 days a fortnight, and it's just devastating, isn't it? So the book's got a handout. The platform's got it. You can check it out now, and I'd love to see what you think and hear feedback on how that kind of situation can play. So I have talked about the first 4 books, right? Like I've talked about in the first book, Pain and Damage. The second book, the biopsychosocial influences. The third book, a kid who doesn't have pain. The fourth book, someone who's already seeing a health professional and engaging in different treatments. And then it's kind of like, well, would you ever use the fifth book? And the answer to that is absolutely. Like to be honest, I think if I had to just pin it down to one book, this would be the one that's absolutely essential. But I don't think you can start here. Does that make sense? So let me just do a quick description. I've written it out for you so you can read along. So it says this book builds upon the other books with a success story of Zoe. So you wake up, I'll just read a little snippet for you. So every book starts with an entry in Zoe's diary, which is really cool, I think. I love the illustrations, they're so nice. It says 7 weeks ago is when it all began. Zoe Zoppins started her action plan. For every strategy, Zoe ticks a box. She takes her deep breaths as she puts on her socks. And so you can see this is at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then you can read her diary entry for that. And now you're going through a day in Zoe's life, so you can follow the clock. Each time you read it, you can point stuff out to the kid, like the doodles in the book. And as you go through this book, you get to see Zoe succeeding in so many different ways, and it's really cool. And then you get to this point where you then see her action plan, and she talks about how she's going to use the plan before she has flare-ups, it's just this culmination of all the great stuff from my clinical and research experience all into one. And so we've got templates available and all sorts of different resources. And we really get the kids to dream big and start thinking way beyond themselves by the end of this journey. And so I think the books end in a really successful and promising manner. Maybe setting up for book 6 at some point. But yeah, I love this idea of a success story. And we see this clinically all the time in a group setting when kids do therapy in a group and they see the other kids improving. It's like, oh, I can do this too. We actually see it in adult pain clinics too. But so the idea of a resource providing that role modeling can even help for a parent going, oh, what do I need to do? And how can I model this to my child? And so there's a lot of helpful behaviors and questions just to get that process started. Because again, it's often about self-discovery. It's getting the kid to go through that journey rather than making them do certain things and then forcing an outcome. I often think that it seems to be that the longer term outcomes are related to that sense of curiosity, which leads to like self-efficacy and that kind of confidence that they can do it themselves. All right, I think I've talked enough. So I just wanted to highlight again, if you wanted to check out anything, there is the online portal. And I wanted to say another big thank you to everyone. I mentioned you all last week, and there's so many more than that. But thank you so much, and particularly Noi Group for hosting these webinars. It's lots of fun, and it has led to an unbelievable number of conversations in the last week. So thank you guys, and thank you for everyone for joining tonight. I'm keen to hear what you have to say now as we do the Q&A. So quick announcements. Next week, we're going to talk about the current evidence. So if you have anyone in your life who is interested, maybe at work, wherever you are, if you want to hear a summary of the evidence about teaching kids about pain science. And then in the last week, we're going to look at some case studies and think about kids in particular. Kids are welcome to come and ask questions as well. That will be really fun, I think. But we'll see. It's all an experiment. I love this. So that's the plan for the next couple of weeks. It's time for the Q&A. If you want to email me or chat online, you can contact me on social media. Just type in. You need to put my middle initial W because there's a NASCAR driver and a Netflix director without the W. So, all right, that is all from me. So I'm going to go back and I'll just pop my video in full. There you go. Hopefully you can see me. And I'll hand it over to the Q&A. I mentioned last week that I will try and answer some of the questions that I received during the week. I think it was like 17 or something that I flagged during the week. I won't answer all of them. But I hope I did answer some of them already tonight. So please do add your questions in the chat. But one in particular that came up was saying they wanted to get it from their local library. And you can contact the library and then they will get it through their distributor. So the answer to that question of how do you get it, if you want to just borrow it and take a look, you're definitely welcome to do that. Basically, the library contacts the distributor, then they go to the publisher, then it goes back, and it takes a little bit of time, but it's definitely possible. And from my perspective, that means that more people then have access, which is great. So do that. That would be really fun. What was another question? There was one other one that I was like, I should mention that. Is there any questions in the Q&A tonight? There were so many last week. I didn't get to all of them. Great. There was another question, actually. Someone asked about what studies we're doing, and I will talk about this a bit more next week, but I can just touch on it really briefly. So there's a study where we're going into schools in Australia. It's only in Australia at the moment. It's a pilot feasibility study. And the idea is giving teachers the framework of kind of that volume buttons that I mentioned earlier, that if danger outweighs safety, then pain is an output, and seeing how that rolls out and trickles into a school system. And so, yeah, if there's schools who are interested and want to be involved in those kind of projects, you can also reach out. That'd be great. All right, I think we have time for one question. Yeah, okay, cool. There's a question of how Australian the book is. Yeah, we had this. So some of the reviewers, these experts from around the world, like from English as a second language countries. And so these are genius people. And they're like, what does that mean? What does that mean? And so there are some Australianisms, I'll call them, but not many. And I liken it, it's probably slightly more conservative than Bluey. Like, so if you think, oh, well, Bluey's been in the news, they had a few issues, even with Americans not liking fart jokes or whatever it was. Yeah, so we've obviously, it's a health professional resource, so we don't want to make any of those kind of errors. And I don't think there's too many Australian jokes, but you'll see things like a Hills hoist in the backyard and some of that stuff, which is nice. So there's a question, can we use the books in South Africa? Yes. I've had a couple of people, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, and then someone this week, doing like big orders there. And so I don't know how, I don't think there's a distributor there. So there's a distributor in Australia, in the US, like North America, in the Netherlands and in the UK. But yeah, there's not one in Africa as far as I'm aware. But the publishers, so Noi Group, you can email them and they are definitely open from what I understand. The idea is it's great if there's more distributors. So I think you can get them, but the shipping is expensive. So there's international pain conferences each year would be one avenue if you didn't want to pay the shipping. But yeah, the book, like in terms of can we use it, like asking for permission, you definitely go for it. You use them as you see fit in your professional discretion. So the next question, who's educating the teachers in the pilot study? Yes, great question. It's led by Rebecca Fechner, who's my PhD student. She's had like 20-something years of being a senior pain physio, brilliant clinician, and now doing research. And so she's running the PD event. But in saying that, it is co-designed. So it's a very simple framework, and then the teachers are using their language, their framework, so it's mapping it onto existing frameworks like zones of regulation, all of that stuff. I won't talk teacher talk now. It would be boring for everyone else, I reckon. No, I'm just joking. So the other question was, is there a way to get involved? Yes, there certainly is. So email me or reach out in some way, and we can chat from there, because it depends who you are, what box you tick and who you could be involved with. So yeah, very exciting. It has just hit, my alarm has just gone off, which means time's up for this week. So next week we're going to talk about the science underpinning all of this conceptual change stuff and how it works. So if you are curious about that, or you know someone, please join in. And then in the fourth week, it will be lots of fun again with some kids and their reactions. So thanks again, and please, let people know. I'm excited to keep this momentum building. It's really fun. And being a children's book author is really exciting. So thanks for your support and kind messages throughout the last week. And I hope more of them keep coming. It's really nice. But let's get the word out and try and help people with pain. So, all right, I'm going to leave it there. See you later, guys. Have a good night.